Fine.
Great.
Okay. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. This is our last day to celebrate just real bad with Disability Employment Awareness Month. And this is being brought to you by the Nebraska Disability Advocate, which is representatives from 22 disability organizations here in Nebraska. First, I would like to acknowledge Melanie Davis from the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, who will be helping me. She'll be in the background, and she'll be sending you all kinds of chats. All the links you might ever want to know about, and some you probably don't want to know about, but it happens. We, in our Dropbox, which Melanie will put the address into the chat, we have a list of keystrokes for Zoom for anybody who needs that, particularly if they're using JAWS. Depending on the device you're using, if you just move your cursor around on the screen, a toolbar will pop up and it will be either at the bottom or at the top. We have 2 sign language interpreters here, and we have them pinned to the screen right now, and they will be pinned all throughout all the presentations. So anybody who needs the interpreter, you might want to spotlight them on your personal screen so that they really stand out so you can see them. That is by if you take your mouse and hover your mouse up in the right hand corner, you'll see 3 dots, and you can just click on those 3 dots and the drop menu will come down and it will say you can spotlight them. We also have closed captioning. If you need that, go on your toolbar. There'll be a little box with a CC in it. Beside that, there's a little arrow. You push on the arrow, and it will give you like a drop-down menu, and you click on show subtitles or enable subtitles. If you have a question on your chat bar, you will see a little, like a cartoon balloon, voice balloon, and it's below it, it says Q&A. If you have a question for any of the speakers, would you please put the question to the Q&A box? The chat box can be just talk about whatever you need to talk about, but sometimes questions get lost if they're put in there. We don't want that to happen. And we will be recording this whole episode today. and we will be putting it on www.nesilc.org. And I just found out today that my web person is on vacation, so they won't get put up till the beginning of next week because I'm not that talented. And on that note, I'm leaving and I'm turning it over to Tobias Orr.
Thank you, Kathy. So hello, everybody. I'm Tobias Orr from ATP, and I'm today's moderator. Today's webinar is on supported employment. Supported employment's been around for decades, and the simplest definition I could come up with for it is supported employment is the process of putting appropriate supports in place to help an individual with disabilities obtain and maintain competitive employment. And so today we're fortunate enough to have three great presenters. We have Carla Lastly from Nebraska VR, who's going to talk about the Nebraska VR process when it comes to support employment. We have Megan Boss from Goodwill Industries, who's going to speak on their placement process for support employment. And then also Tamara Snyder from Goodwill Industries, who will speak about the ongoing supports for support employment provided by them. And so if you have questions throughout the presentation, please put them in the Q&A box that Kathy talked about. At the end of the three presentations, we have time set aside to answer questions. So as you think of them, throw them in there and we'll get to it towards the end. And so at this point, I'm going to turn over to Carla Lastly from Nebraska VR, and she can start her presentation. So take it away, Carla.
Thanks, Tobias. My name is Carla Lastly. As Tobias said, I work with Nebraska VR as the Community Services Program Director, and I oversee the Supported Employment Program as well as benefits services that we authorize for people to receive from vendors. So I am going to share my screen. I have a little PowerPoint presentation to share with you all. And so today I'll talk about the VR process, which is the actual process that everyone goes through who comes to VR. You don't come to VR and get supported employment immediately. There's a planning process that occurs to determine whether supported employment is the right kind of plan for a person. So I'll go through that process and talk then about more specifically about supported employment services and the supported employment plan. And then at the supported employment milestones payments, which is the method by which we provide payment to providers who help people to be employed under a supported employment plan. And then I'll preview some future revisions to supported employment that we have planned for the next year. Let's see. So the VR process, and as I said, this applies to anyone who comes to VR as a referral. Initially, once a person is referred, we make contact with them within 10 calendar days so that we can set up a meeting, and we call that our orientation or initial meeting. And that gives the person the opportunity to learn about VR, to view a video, which is an orientation video, to talk about goals and objectives, whether the person is interested in additional training or education or wants employment right away. And then there's also the discussion of history, the person's employment, their education, what medical needs they might have, social issues, any other factors that impact the person, including how they're impacted by those issues in their employment endeavors. And then we also will at that point provide information and referral to other resources the person might be able to access. So if the person applies for VR services and makes that choice, then we determine the eligibility and priority group for them. We look at medical and educational records and verify that they have a permanent impairment, as that's a requirement in order to be eligible for VR services. And then we determine the priority group. And that, I won't go into a great deal of detail on that, but it is important to know that we have three priority groups. The first is priority 1, and that is reserved for those people who are found to have severe physical or mental impairments that result in a rating of very low in 2 or more functional areas. And then priority 2 is a person who has with a severe physical or mental impairment that results in a rating of very low in 1 functional area. And then priority 3 is all other people with a low rating in at least 1 of the 7 functional areas. So the reason that's important in particular is right now VR doesn't have the funds to be able to support everyone who comes to apply for services. Currently, we are fortunate to have priority group 1 open. So a person who applies today for VR services and is determined to be a priority 1 does not go on a waiting list. Others will wait, and priority 2, though while the category is not open, we are serving people under priority who are priority 2. So that's also good news. The wait is not as long for that group. Priority 3, we are not yet serving. So the eligibility and priority group determination leads us to the next steps, which are either the person goes to planning and assessment, or they go on a waiting list essentially. And then there is one exception to the order of selection, and that's what we call it when we have a waiting list, the order of selection. And that is for somebody who requires job retention services that are provided by VR. It would either be a VR service or equipment that's required by VR, or that VR provides and is required in order for the person to be able to retain their job. And it's like an immediate need. And that retention, that enables a person to jump ahead so that they actually get services without going on a waiting list. We have served quite a few people who were in danger of losing their jobs by providing a VR service, and they were able to retain it. So even with a waiting list, that has been something that has been possible. So those who go on for planning go through discussion, exploration, assessment of potential careers. We look at and discuss the person's strengths, their resources, their priorities, what their interests are. And we also look at the labor market information in their area to ensure that they're able to look at all the information available to make an informed choice about whether they want to go forth with an individualized plan for employment. We might do discovery, which is a process that's typically used, it's used with everyone. There's a more intense discovery process for people who may require supported employment to actually look at all kinds of various things to identify interests and capabilities and abilities and contacts and things that might lead to employment or to a job goal. And then we also conduct at that point a benefits orientation, which is a process, a service that's provided by VR staff to look at the person's benefits, their federal, state, local benefits, and make sure that the person knows how their benefits will be affected to a degree if they are earning income, but also to look at what kinds of work incentives they might be able to use in order to lessen the impact of working on their benefits. Following planning, the individualized plan for employment is developed, and that plan really establishes the steps and the services that are going to be authorized in order for the person to reach their employment goal. And the person chooses a service provider from those who are available in their area when it comes to supported employment. Of course, if they're getting VR services, they might get placement through VR, or they may opt for an educational plan or training. So there's all kinds of things that might be a service that's authorized. I'm trying to really highlight the supported employment services a person might need and what happens with someone who requires supported employment. So by this time, we're really talking about a supported employment plan. The plan is in place at the time that all the signatures are in place. And VR services, which, as I mentioned, are authorized. They may be supported employment services. There may be other things that VR provides, such as support for transportation, There may be uniforms or other things that need to be authorized in order for the person to be able to attain their job goal. And then employment follow-up occurs once the person is employed, and VR remains in contact in support of the person's job retention over time and to address any additional needs that come up. So when it comes to a supported employment service and the development of that supported employment plan, it really is intended for those with most significant disabilities so that they can receive the support to obtain and maintain competitive and integrated employment. And that's kind of the introduction that Tobias provided. We look at supported employment for those who have little or no or interrupted work histories, those who really need extended services after VR provides the services to obtain and get to stability. And those services are typically provided by behavioral health or by the developmental disability system in our state for those who are eligible for those services, or sometimes natural supports can be put in place. There are 4 groups of people who may be determined to need supported employment. We have 4 different kind of programs for supported employment for those with intellectual and other developmental disabilities, people with behavioral health needs, those with acquired brain injury, and people who have autism. And the supported plan has been developed through discovery and other information that's available to determine the person's job goal. You can well imagine that if you've never worked before, it's pretty difficult to say what you want to do. So the whole idea is to have exploration and discovery to determine what kind of a goal might work best for the person in meeting their interests, needs, capabilities, and overall goals in life. And then the plan also includes an approximation of the number of hours the person wants to work, and they're making that decision through an informed choice after they've been provided some benefit services. Then the person, as I mentioned, would choose a provider from the available supported employment providers in their area, and milestones are authorized by the VR staff as the person makes progress toward their goal. You'll often hear people talk about milestones, and that really is just the payment service, the payment system that VR uses in order to pay providers to support people to reach specific outcomes in the employment process. And there are 5 milestones presently. The first is paid at the time that job services are initiated. The provider completes their intake activities, and the job search is initiated based on the person's job goal. The placement milestone, milestone 2, is paid once the person is placed on the job. Milestone 3 is really intended to be paid at the point where the person is considered stabilized on the job, in that they've worked at least 30 days and that they've had their satisfaction by the employer with regard to their progress and their performance, as well as satisfaction by the person. The hours are working for them, the working conditions are working for them. Sometimes it takes considerably longer than 30 days, but that's just a minimum. And then milestone 4 is paid at closure. The person has to have been working at least a total of 90 days in order to, for supported employment, in order for that closure to occur. And there needs to be extended services, those services that will continue to provide support to the person after VR closure. Those are in place. And then presently, VR pays job retention incentives as part of milestone 5. There's a payment at 6 months and one at 12 months if the person remains in the same job. So that's really a brief overview of supported employment by VR, but I wanted to make you aware also of some upcoming changes that we're making. Currently, we're undergoing a cost methodology study that will really be kicked off this month. and be completed by June 30th of 2022. And we have contracted with an entity, the Public Consulting Group, PCG, and they will be working with providers and stakeholders to identify not only whether the costs are in line to ensure that we're paying costs that are in line with the actual cost of the service, but also to look at revisions to milestones and payment schedules that we've identified as needs in order to make upgrades to the program. We anticipate we will make the necessary changes, do all the training, and will implement changes effective October 1st of next year. And some of the anticipated improvements include some changes where we will include in the service definitions some support for goal setting and assurance of the job fit. We want to look at measurable criteria to determine stabilization rather than just satisfaction or so many days on the job. We want to look at how we transition to extended services and make sure those services are in place before we actually close the case. And we are interested in also making sure that we have continued education on work incentives so that people are using those work incentives to lessen the effects on their benefits and to maximize their economic self-sufficiency. So my contact information is here, and I have made the PowerPoint available so that you can all receive it. We'll have questions at the end, and I want to turn the presentation back, I guess, to Tobias so that you can introduce our next presenters.
Thank you very much, Carla. Up next, we have Megan Boss from Goodwill Industries. So Megan, take it away.
Thank you. Well, wait a minute while Tamara brings up the PowerPoint here. First off, I'll introduce myself. I'm Megan Boss. I'm the Program Manager for Supported Employment Services for Goodwill Industries of Greater Nebraska. I'm located in Columbus, and then I also oversee our benefits planning services and the Ticket to Work program that we offer, and those services are available statewide. We're going to talk about some of those supports that Carla had highlighted, of the supports that a provider provides to an individual. One model that is particular to support employment is the individual placement and support model. There's a variety of different methods of individuals that provide support employment and how they offer those services. And many providers in Nebraska follow the IPS model. And so we're going to kind of highlight some of those characteristics of the IPS model and then show how some of that is kind of played out into services. So it is an evidence-based practice. It was originally studied and validated for individuals with mental illness, but it has been proven successful for a variety of populations, including veterans and individuals with a developmental or intellectual disability. Every study that has been completed about IPS has shown a significant advantage versus other methods. There are many principles of the IPS model, and so we're going to highlight a little bit of those principles, as well as how those have been kind of translated to rural Nebraska. Some of this has been created in bigger cities nationwide, and so we have adjusted some of those principles to make them more appropriate for Nebraska and for our braided funding models with the Division of Developmental Disabilities as well as Division of Behavioral Health. And so those are zero exclusion. Ideally, anyone that wants to work, we want to help get to work. And it is based on individual choice. And it's not, we don't want to exclude anyone based on a diagnosis, or if they've been recently hospitalized, or if they have a criminal background, or that work readiness. We try to avoid saying that if someone is work ready. If they want to work, we will help them work. And looking at competitive employment. So we help job seekers find competitive jobs in a community setting with others who do not have identified disabilities, earning at least minimum wage. And it's a rapid job search process. Employment specialists help people start looking for jobs within 1 month of starting the program. And it involves systematic job development. So based on the individual's interests, employment specialists build relationships with employers to learn about employers' needs in order to identify qualified job candidates. Employment specialists make multiple visits to an employer to develop that relationship, and that can average about 6 face-to-face contacts with hiring managers per week. Another thing that's really important with IPS is looking at the individual's preferences. The job search is based on the individual's preferences, strengths, and work experiences, not necessarily what is being advertised in the community. So kind of that old view of looking at the job postings and kind of applying for those jobs. IPS really looks at what is this person's skills and strengths and what places are hiring for that and have that need in placing and targeting kind of that job search in that direction. And job seekers indicate preferences for job type, work hours, and types of job supports that are needed. And it's an integrated service model. And so we would like to have a team approach in whatever manner that can be. And so sometimes we can't always have the exact model that was proposed of having like a med provider and a counselor and all these different components as part of a team, but we want to incorporate as much of that as possible. And so you might involve care coordinators, therapists if available, medication providers when that's available, housing specialists, benefits specialists, employment specialists, VR staff, as well as service coordinators. Whoever is part of your team is really important in your decision-making. We would want to have that as an integrated service option. And the team does meet regularly in IPS and helps coordinate those services. And benefits counseling is a big component of IPS, making sure that you have access to a benefits specialist to receive individualized benefits planning by a trained benefits specialist so that you can make informed choices about your job. And it's time unlimited support. So employment specialists provide support for as long as needed and requested without time limits. So it's very person-centered. So if somebody wants to work for up to 6 months with having support, that's okay. Or if somebody wants more long-term supports and wants to try advancing into a different type of career or advancing in their company, we can support that as well. And they're individualized based on the needs of the person. And we help people with job changes and career advancement, as I mentioned. So I think the biggest thing, just regarding supported employment in general, the biggest key to success is desire. If someone wants to work, that is the first thing, is to ensure they want to work. And I think this quote is important. The starting point of all achievement is desire. And so that's kind of where we start when we look at supported employment. So if somebody wants to pursue competitive employment, where do they start? So really looking at a person's unique gifts and talents and figuring out what job direction. And so when working with Nebraska VR, they do work on that piece of figuring out a job goal so that when they go to a provider, we can kind of hit the ground running of what options to look at for employment. It does help identify a person's purpose and their value to the workforce. So competitive employment is working part-time or full-time. It can be regular jobs in the community. It must pay at least minimum wage. And we say that, but the average individuals that we see in support employment earn, $11 to $12 on average. And so it's even far above minimum wage. And we want the positions to have same pay as benefits and benefits as others would receive in the same position. And they're permanent jobs. So looking at options that they could have as a career. And some benefits of competitive employment is it allows for increased income, improved self-esteem, having that sense of purpose, improved social network, increased quality of life, and it does reduce hospitalization and need for mental health services, and that also reduces substance use. We have found that individuals that if they do use substances when they start working and really have that sense of purpose and something to look forward to every day, their substance use does decline. Okay, so the job development process. Now you figured out kind of the direction of what you want to do for work. It's looking at the employment in the community and figuring out some opportunities to learn more about. So we want to identify jobs and places that need that person's skills. Learning about the businesses and positions available can be done in a variety of ways. You can do tours to kind of see the environment and get to meet people before someone would apply. You can also do interviews with employers to learn about their business. And so these are just a few of the things that we look at for supported employment, is looking at the environment. If someone has some different needs, they might need to be, lighting might need to be looked at, temperature, you know, is it a hot environment, cold environment? Is it really loud? Is it a quiet environment? What accommodations can be put in place? And seeing maybe some of those accommodations in action in some of the employees. Work culture is big. And so how do managers interact with employees? How is that coworker communication? What is the attitude of the work environment? What values does the company have? What's the training process look like? So trying to absorb as much information as you can about an employer. And then looking at the specific work tasks. What is the speed that is expected for the position? Maybe what skill level do you have to have coming in? Is it entry level? Do you need to have experience? And physical requirements. And one thing not to forget, you can consider customized opportunities. And right now is a great opportunity to do that. I think businesses are even more open to new and creative ideas to have staff that can be retained long-term. So sometimes the talent you have or your interest is not yet created in your community. And that can happen especially in rural communities. There's not as many jobs posted. And so sometimes looking at a created opportunity can be an option. So what do those job seeking supports look like? So an employment specialist can help out with the job development, and they can help you match an appropriate job fit, as well as doing some of the following supports: helping fill out paper and online applications, creating a resume, doing a cover letter, practicing for interviews, acquiring interview clothing, maybe working on hygiene if needed, getting those things in place, following up after an interview, following up after an application. Sometimes that's one piece that's missed, is just, you know, I sent my application to 10 places and I haven't heard back. And sometimes just following up can help so much, just get them in the door at a business. And addressing transportation needs. Depending on the size of community, transportation can be a huge deal of being able to get to work. So here you might look at benefit services a little bit as well. So if you're interested in a position across town, you know, maybe using an impairment related work expense that was mentioned on Tuesday, of getting across town and being able to have some of that cost reimbursed if you have Social Security benefits. And then also employer advocacy. That can be so huge. Just being able to talk to employers. Sometimes the individuals themselves, when you're applying for a job, it's hard to kind of advocate for yourself and talk about all the skills you have to offer. So bringing someone in that can kind of help bridge that communication from you to a business can be huge. I know of an individual recently, kind of in our Columbus area, that had interviewed for a job and they didn't hear back. And the employment specialist, you know, kept good communication with the business from the beginning and throughout the whole process, and kind of explained really why that person was a good fit. And they interviewed the person again, and they thought, okay, this might be an opportunity. And now that person's their best employee. They are just so excited to have that person there because they do such great work. And so sometimes having that extra advocacy can make just a world of a difference. Job matching is so important. So even for us, if anyone is looking for a job, you're thinking about, is it a good fit for me in my life? And so we want to be looking at, does it match the skills, interests, and abilities? And everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And so we all have things we can't do or are really good at. And so we want to make sure the job we accept or try is a good match. And so we also want to look at some of those preferences and work requirements. There could be a schedule things that apply to you. Pay, how much you want to get paid for a position, if you need benefits or not. And so those are some components of job matching, of thinking about, is it a good fit for the individual? And then again, looking at benefits in this situation, how will earnings impact my benefits? Before you accept a job, it's kind of nice to know what that would look like, so that when you accept it, you don't have that kind of nervousness of wondering, you know, will I keep my benefits? Will I keep my health insurance? So these are some of the things that we can do in partnership with Nebraska VR, is providing a benefits assessment and providing benefits summary analysis to you, payees, guardians, and families about what would the impact would be of Social Security on Social Security with working. So will I maintain my SSI, SSDI, or my childhood disability benefit? Will I maintain access to Medicaid and or Medicare? What work incentives can I use to help me achieve my goal? And then what will be the impact on other state benefits? And so that can be like housing, SNAP benefits. And so we kind of look at that whole picture of what the impact would be, so you feel really comfortable and ready to work. Okay, so that's kind of some of the prep that goes on in the whole process of job development, getting a job, and some of those principles with IPS and how Supported Employment Nebraska plays those out. Now we're going to focus on some of the supports after getting a job. So Tamara is going to talk about that.
Thanks, Megan. So I'm Tamara Snyder, and I am the Director of Employment and Career Services for Goodwill Industries of Greater Nebraska. And just a little background, I've been in this field for about 17 years now, and I work out of the Kearney office, but we have supported employment services in Hastings, Grand Island, Columbus, Kearney, Lexington, North Platte, and McCook, and surrounding communities. So that's just a little background on me. So. All right, so now the individual or person we're working with has gotten a job. So what does that mean? Well, supported employment doesn't stop when someone gets a job. In fact, sometimes the getting the job part, especially now with the job market the way it is the easy part. It's then keeping that job and figuring out what supports are needed on that job to make that job continue to be successful. So the quality job match, the initial supports, and the planning are extremely important because they oftentimes will lessen the amount of ongoing supports needed. However, we all know that change is inevitable. You know, there's new supervisors, new job duties, life circumstances. I don't think any of us thought in the beginning of 2020 that we would be where we're at today with the COVID-19 pandemic. So life happens and supports are needed. And so our goal is to make sure also that the job enhances the quality of someone's life. And like most people, the folks that we work with may decide they don't like the job anymore after 6 months. They want to pursue something different. Maybe they want a promotion or a career advancement, or maybe something changed within the job that they're just not satisfied with anymore. So when we go back and think about what Megan had talked about with the unlimited supports and things we can do long-term, another thing that we can do is help people with career advancement. That may mean that they continue with the supported employment provider and we help them. It may mean we go back to VR and look at, you know, some education or some further training, or we work with different partners in the community, or we ourselves as supported employment providers help people, you know, continue to move on. So what are the types and frequency of support you see when someone has a job? Well, again, as Megan talked about, the supports are individualized to meet the need of each person. When I was trying to develop this training today, I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much. How do I put this all down on a PowerPoint? Because it's so individualized and it's so dependent on that person. You just never know. And so I would just say that employment specialists are flexible to meet the needs of the individuals in our services. And that doesn't just mean flexible in our thinking and our creativity, but the hours and the days that we work. Employment specialists have to be there to meet the needs of the individuals. Not everyone wants to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. You know, some people have to work holidays, weekends, overnight shifts, and employment specialists in supported employment services are available to assist with all those hours, all those needs, because we want to be there to help people be successful. So just that's a big piece of it, is that flexibility. Again, the supports are determined by the needs of each individual. We may have a great relationship with employer X, but if that employer is not a good fit for the individual that we're working with, we're going to look for A, B, C, and D. We're going to find that fit. Supports are going to start off maybe more frequent, again, depending on the needs of the individual, but our goal is that that's going to lessen over time. We're going to fade out supports. We want to provide the supports in the least intrusive manner possible. And so, you know, we'll start up a little high. As soon as we're able to kind of fade back, we're gonna do that. I always joke around with the team of people we have here at Goodwill, because our goal, which is kind of ironic, is to work ourselves out of a job because we want to help people be successful and move them to that independence so that we're backing out. And so our goal is to work ourselves out of a job so that people could be successful in their job. And then the supports are provided both on and off the job. Again, it just really depends on the needs of the person we're working with. Some people might need us on site for a while. Some may not need us on site at all, and we can just provide supports, you know, outside of the work site. Some people don't want us there. They don't want, you know, some people see it as a stigma attached to them if they have a support on site. And so if they don't want us at the work site, we're not going to be there. We're going to provide supports however we can do that in a way that makes sense for them. Again, our goal is to help people become independent in their work life. But let's talk a little bit about the on-site supports. So I think a lot of times when people think of supported employment, the first thing oftentimes that people think of is the on-site job coaching. And yes, that's a piece of it. And that is a huge piece that we do with some people, but that's not needed for everyone. So job coaches are individuals who specialize in assisting individuals with disabilities to learn and accurately carry out job duties. They provide one-on-one training tailored to the needs of the employee. They may first have to do a job analysis to identify the job duties, and then follow that up with developing a specific plan on how best to train that employee. Because again, everyone's different. So the way that you job coach one person on a job may look very different from the way you would job coach someone else on the very same job. Let's see. Okay. And then the goal again is to work with them until they are self-sufficient and able to perform the duties without assistance. And this is just a quote from the Job Accommodation Network that I borrowed from them because I felt like it was a really good definition of job coaching. So some examples of job coaching that we would do on site. Onboarding assistance seems to be something that I know our staff do a lot of, and that basically the person oftentimes is very skilled and knows how to do the job, but maybe they just need assistance getting through the new hire paperwork, or maybe there's some responsibilities to have to do some computer-based initial training, and maybe they aren't very great with computers. They can do the job duties just fine, but they need help just getting through that onboarding part, understanding maybe the details of the job. Another big part of job coaching is learning job tasks themselves. And that could be things as simple as figuring out a workflow. Maybe you don't know, you know how to do the task, you can't figure out how to make it flow right to be the most efficient, and job coaches can be there to assist with figuring that out, learning job tasks themselves. So what job coaches will do is a task analysis, and basically that's breaking down the whole task into smaller pieces and then training on each piece. And it could be that, you know, the person knows how to do the first 3 steps, but it's the 4th and 5th step that are causing them some struggles. So we focus on those, help them learn that until again, the point that they're completely independent. So our job coaches, our employment specialists in support employment have to learn a lot of job duties, where we have very varied and skilled staff that have done lots of different jobs in all the various communities that we work in, because we have to learn how to do them to be successful at training others. The ongoing training assistance, you know, again, if a job changes, if there's monthly computer-based learnings, again, sometimes we may have to go on and do that. So that can be a piece of job coaching. Basically anything that someone needs help learning, our job coaches are going to be out there to help figure it out. It might mean that we need to develop some accommodations, right? Or help them identify some natural supports. Maybe for some of those long-term needs, you might have to have an accommodation or a natural support in place. So as far as developing job accommodations, I think sometimes when people think about accommodations, they think huge things. And a job accommodation does not have to be a big thing. It can be as simple as developing a checklist. You know, maybe someone is struggling with some memory issues. They need a compensatory strategy in place. A checklist is a great thing. Here's your list of duties. Check it off when you're done. Make sure it's all done. That might be all they need as an accommodation. Diagrams, even flexible scheduling. I worked with an individual many years ago who really struggled around being around a lot of people. It just gave him a lot of anxiety. And so I worked with the employer to switch his schedule around. So he came in early in the morning before the public and at the end of the day after the public left. And that's when he did his cleaning responsibilities. And that worked great for him to have that split shift where he didn't have to be around people. That was a simple accommodation and he was very successful in that job. If someone's struggling with getting things done in a timely fashion, or maybe they're coming back late from work or for their break. An accommodation could be as simple as setting up a timer. We've worked with, there's a question there, is there a need for assistive technology? We've brought in assistive technology many times with folks that we've worked with, and they've helped them getting devices, like putting apps on their smartphones, watches that can do all sorts of fun stuff. I'm sure Tobias could tell you a lot more about that stuff that could happen with assistive technology. We've had assistive technology come in and help us get cooling vests. If we have someone that gets overheated in a job and that job is perfect, other than that, we've worked with them to get cooling vests, floor mats to help make it easier for people to stand on concrete. Stools, if it's a job where they could sit and stand, we've brought in stools and worked with employers to do that. And then again, there's so many cool phone apps that you can do. If someone has an iPod, iPad, you can bring in those, put some cool apps on them. It can really help them do their job. And through our job coaching, we've done things like videoed someone doing their task properly while we coach them, and then they use that video and maybe watched it before their shift to remind themselves on how to properly do it. Or pictures, this is what the employer expects it to look like when you're done with your task, and you have that picture as a reference. All those things can be developed and then become natural supports potentially on the job. The other big thing with job coaching is you want to identify those people on the job that can be those natural supports, not only ahead of the job with family, friends, that sort of thing, but those people on the job. You want the employer to be the trainer, because you're not going to be there forever, right? We want to work ourselves out of the job. So we want the employer to be the natural trainer on site. And so who are those supports? That's something you'll do during job development, figuring that out, making sure they're involved in the process and know the accommodations that are in place. And then finally, we do a lot of assisting with employer communication. So it might be that, Megan talked about this during the interview process. They might struggle with doing an interview. They might struggle once they're on the job with communication, assisting with communication with coworkers, going to those employer meetings that can sometimes be intimidating, helping them go through performance reviews, just as a support person, helping advocate, encouraging them to advocate for themselves, attending staff trainings, helping them request time off, pay raises, and then properly ending employment if we do get to that point where perhaps they want to move on to something different. All those things are, part of what supported employment can do for someone. So there's a lot of offsite supports too, because again, not everyone wants you on site with the employer. And it is important, again, that supports are provided in the least intrusive manner possible. And so we can, as support employment providers, we can meet with people where they want to meet. It's about their preference. So we meet with people in their home. We've met at restaurants, parks, libraries, and in our office. Sometimes it's nice to have our computer right there where we're able to do some of those things. COVID has been interesting. We've learned a lot about virtual service delivery and set up, online WebEx meetings or Zoom meetings. And we've done some FaceTiming. It's been really creative since we had to go virtual for a while. And we've continued to support people that way. Again, if that's their preference and that's what they want, then we will do virtual means as well. What do we assist with offsite? This is basically everything else that you don't necessarily do at the employer site. So things like helping them arrange transportation, helping, and we want them a part of that process, because everything that we're going to do, we're wanting them to learn to do themselves again, so we can do it. They can do it independently, so people can do the work independently. So things like helping with transportation, it might be helping them figure out who those supports are that can provide the transportation, finding money resources to pay for transportation. Budgeting is another thing we help people with. Once they start working, maybe their expectation is people have to start paying for their own transportation. So how do they arrange that and work that out? That's other stuff that our employment specialists can help with. Scheduling, it goes with the work-life balance. Once you start a job and you're working 20 hours a week, all of a sudden you don't have as much free time. So how do you balance all that out? And that can be a real struggle for people sometimes. Helping with just problem solving, purchasing needed items for work. You might start off with all the new items, and 4 months down the road, you might need something new. How do you purchase that? What do you need? We work a lot with, again, Nebraska VR, other resources in the community to help make sure people's needs are met. And so we may have to help the person call VR and say, hey, I need this. Can you help me? And if not, we're going to figure out another resource to potentially get that item. Car repairs, that goes along with transportation. Symptom management. Again, it's really good for people to work. You know, you saw what Megan had said about how competitive employment improves people's lives. It's also stressful. And so it can lead to some new symptoms. And so we may have to, you know, work through that, whether it's a referral to a therapist or just a session where we kind of talk through how was your day? You know, what can we do? What coping skills can you put in place? You know, what if you were stressed out at work, instead of walking out, what can we do instead? So working through some of those types of things. Medical needs, helping people make sure they have the proper clothing or work attire, uniforms that they need for a job. Conflict resolution, people might lose motivation to work. So working with them on, you know, the pros and cons of a job, you know, using those motivational interviewing skills to discuss, well, you know, how are things for you then? How are they now? Really helping people understand, you know, their motivation to work. And reporting wages and ongoing benefits planning. So, you know, Megan talked a little bit about doing that plan in the beginning. Well, oftentimes, you know, once people are working, they always have to report their wages, but they may get letters from Social Security that are intimidating. And so we may need to provide assistance with helping understand those letters. We might have to bring back in a benefits specialist to help them navigate some of that. And that's stuff that supported employment can also do. And then finally, the career advancement stuff that I had mentioned earlier. So what specific activities do we do with individuals we're working with? We might just be as simple as having a discussion with them. How's work going? You know, just a check-in. It might be that we're completing tasks together offsite. So, you know, they might come to us and have an issue that came up and we might need to call Social Security together, or we might need to call transportation and figure that out. So we complete the task together. Role play is something that we often do with individuals. You know, if they want to have a conversation with their employer about a pay raise, we want to encourage everyone to do that themselves, but we'll walk them through what that's going to look like, develop a script, let's do a role play, let's practice it. Again, it's all about teaching folks how to be independent. We might have to do some research if there's an issue that they're having. We might have to look some things up and help figure it out. Referrals, we do a lot of referrals to community partners for unmet needs. Transportation, support employment, we provide a lot of transportation. You know, until people get those transportation plans in place or have money sometimes to pay, we might have to provide that. So we as support employment providers often provide the transportation for a while. Communication with the team. This is hugely important. You know, Megan talked about that in the job development process. It's an ongoing communication with the team. Service coordination, Nebraska VR, family, guardians, payees, case managers, if they have community support, whoever is in their life that's a part of that team, we're going to make sure we try to include those throughout the process to problem solve and, you know, make sure that people have what they need to be successful. And last but definitely not least is communication with employers. So the relationship with the employer is absolutely a vital part of supported employment, not only for that job development piece, but for the ongoing. You know, we need to work with employers to ensure people, you know, have what they need on their job and can be successful. Our best practice, the IPS model Megan talked about, indicated that employment specialists should have at least 20 to 25 employers with whom they are maintaining contact at any time. And you know, if we're out talking to 6 a week, that should be pretty easy to get 20 to 25. And it is very, very important. So what do we do with employers? Job development, like Megan talked about, and that's always, even when we're out working with other people, we're still keeping an eye out. What are the unmet needs of this employer? Do they have job openings? Do I have anyone else that might be a great fit here? We're going to work with the employer and the individual together to develop training and supports. We can't be there forever. What can we put in place ongoing? Problem solving through concerns on the job. We always want our employers to be comfortable calling us and saying, hey, this is a concern. What can we do? How can we remedy this? And we've saved lots of jobs over the years just by having that relationship. Conflict resolution, again, putting those accommodations in place. We need to have buy-in from the employer to switch schedules and do some of those accommodations. We've had employers that have allowed us to basically change their environment. We've put up posters that employers have actually used as an ongoing resource for all their employees, as something that we developed to help an individual we were working with, but it actually ended up helping the employment site as a whole. And we've had that happen many times over the years, as I'm sure a lot of support employment providers have. Building those natural supports, we want that employer to be there and be that person. And then, of course, discussing career advancement opportunities with the employer. We really want to help people grow. And if they want to change jobs, we want to work with the employer and understanding, what does that mean? How can this person get promoted? Are there additional job duties that they can do? We do a lot of job carving with employers. So, it might be in the development process that, the individual really wants this job, but maybe there's a piece of it they can't do. And so we can work with employers to carve that piece out and have, the individual's job be this instead of that. And we can continue to do that throughout, as adding job responsibilities coming around and just helping people advance and have more opportunities. So finally, we're down to the last bit. So here's our contact information. Megan Boss and myself. And then I just had a little slide here of our references, which is the IPS Employment Center. That's the best practice that we reference. And then the Job Accommodation Network, which is, a great resource for supported employment providers to use when looking at accommodations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Megan. So we do have a couple questions. The first one I think is for Megan. Regarding what Goodwill does, at what age can all that start?
Might actually be for the other two, and I'll take the second one.
How about you, Tamara? Can you answer that one?
Sure. So our supported employment services, the individuals typically have to be 19 or older unless there's an age waiver, or they have to be in their, depending on what VR refers, typically they have to be in their second semester of their last year of high school. So they have to be kind of moving into the adult services age. We do not at this time through Goodwill Support Employment have youth services. So they have to be in adult age. So close to graduating or 19 or older with an age waiver, depending on, I guess, the disability.
Thank you.
Carla, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say that VR also has pre-employment transition services for those who are in school, which gives students the opportunity to work at different employment settings to gain experience. So it's kind of a continuum of services. Supported employment really is intended after those pre-employment transition services are completed.
And Carla,
Yes.
the transition services start when the kid is 14, right?
Correct. Yes, for pre-employment. Yes. That's it. Yes. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Carla. So next question is, and Megan, you can answer this one. How does Goodwill do a job analysis? Do they actually go to the site and watch or talk to others in that job, or are they just given a job description from the employer?
So oftentimes we will start off looking at that job description just to kind of get an idea of what the position is. But by no means do we stop there. We get out and go see jobs. We go to the employers, we see it on site. Sometimes we even bring individuals with us so they can see the job before they apply. So everyone kind of knows what that position looks like. There's so many factories located here in Columbus. I think about all their businesses, and reading their job descriptions, you cannot figure out what they truly do. You have to get in there and see it. You have to observe. You have to see what pieces are needed, how long it takes to do different aspects. There's so many components you can see just visually getting into the business. And so that's what we do a lot, is get into the businesses so we can really know what the positions are, what the requirements are, and help meet businesses' needs.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I guess I'll speak to the audience. Is there any other questions? Because that's all we have in the Q&A board at the moment.
You have a third question in the box.
That was just a thank you for answering the questions.
Okay, yeah, and there was a question that somebody put in the chat, and it was addressed to for Carla.
I think,
Does somebody have to find the job themselves first, all by themselves, before they can apply to get supported employment?
No, absolutely not. That is part of the supported employment, the job development and job placement. And if you're not getting supported employment, VR also supports people in placement to obtain jobs.
okay, I got another question here. Are there any supports for an individual who would need assistance with personal needs, such as assistance with toileting?
Are we talking about support on the job?
I would assume so, yes.
Yeah, that would be something that needs to be developed as part of the plan. So determining how those supports can be provided and what resources can be brought to bear to help with that. That's really definitely part of the career planning and the job planning.
Perfect, thank you. Let's see, another question. It says, and I'm not sure who this is directed at, but it says, do you work with any inclusive coaches in larger corporations?
Inclusive. Can somebody
I guess you had to
provide a
elaborate on
definition of inclusive? Oh, would it be like somebody who's actually got an inclusive coach in an employment situation, like a tech company? I know I've seen that occur in like national companies like Google and Facebook. And
it says here, called inclusive coaches representing LGBTQIA.
Oh, there is no prohibition of that. We definitely would look at what that, really what the person needs. So yeah, that's something we need to learn about, I think. Thanks for bringing it up.
I'm looking at chat real fast.
I was thinking there was a question earlier, maybe about if we help people get jobs they like or want. Was that in there? I just wanted to reply to that. I don't know if that person's still on, but everything we,
it's a good question.
Yeah, everything we do is person-centered. So it is based on what the person wants to do. And so we start off with that of figuring out what do they really want to do and what kind of aspects of a job they may like and try to find the best fit. So it always starts with the person. We may give some ideas based on, employers we know and opportunities and things like that, but it does start with the person. We may be employment specialists, but we're not experts on them. They are experts on themselves and what they're best at. So I just wanted to clarify that in case that wasn't addressed.
And really to make sure that we're not implying that we're working in silos, because the VR IPE is the individualized plan for employment is really aimed at determining the person's interests and goals and what they really want to do. So we would set a goal based on that and typically have the supported employment provider involved with that and an understanding of that. But of course, that can be amended along the way too if the person has chosen that maybe something doesn't really work for them and they want to pursue another goal. So it's kind of a continuous process to refine that.
Tobias, I'm gonna let Kelly Ellerbush talk because she had something she wanted to say about something People First is doing. So Kelly, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. I just wanted to let everyone know about a project that People First of Nebraska is beginning this month. It's a 2-year project, but our plan is to develop a video and some marketing aimed at employers to let them know what a great resource people with disabilities are as employees. And so what we are looking for are real life examples of people with disabilities working successfully on a job and interviewing them and their employers to find out about maybe accommodations that needed to be made, or assistance that a person with a disability may need to get rolling on a job. But also to let employers know that it's not that difficult and it's not that complicated. And we also want to develop a good set of resources for employers that are interested in looking into people with disabilities as employees. So you can reach me at peoplefirstnebraska@outlook.com or on our Facebook page if you have someone that you would like to nominate for our video or some resources that you would like to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Well, not seeing any more questions in the Q&A. I guess I would like to thank all of our presenters. Did a fantastic job today, and I'd like to thank everybody for showing up, and I'll turn it back over to you, Kathy.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody. You did a really great job. And it just added to the depth and wealth of information that has been made available over the last 3 days. Our next session, we get back to the regular first Thursday of every month. And so our first Thursday of November is actually next week. So we are going to be having a session on person-centered planning and the Department of Health and Human Services, what they're doing to incorporate it into the way they do business. So I hope you will be joining us. And I also wanted to tell you that, again, that if you know somebody that wants to see the video of this, it will be on our website next week at www.nesilc.org/videos. And if anybody has any suggestions for future topics, feel free to reach out to me at Kathy@nesilc.org. And thank you very much for coming. Good night, good afternoon, have whatever.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.